review of the story Romeo and Juliet. So, Romeo and Juliet began as the chorus introducing the two feuding families of Verona, the Capulets and the Montagues. So it is a hot summer. Young men of each faction fight until the Prince of Verona intercedes and threatens to banish them. Soon after, the head of the Capulets family plans a feast. His goal is to introduce Juliet to a named count named Paris, who seeks to marry Juliet. So Montague's son Romeo and his friends hear the party and resolve to go in disguise. So Romeo was hoping to see his beloved Rosalie at the party. Instead, while there, he meets Juliet and falls instantly in love with her. Juliet's cousin Tybalt recognizes the Montagues boys and forces them to leave just as Romeo and Juliet discover one another. So Romeo lingers near the Capulet house to talk with Juliet, and he appears at her window. Romeo and Juliet declare their love and intend to marry next day with the help of Juliet's nurse. There, they are secretly married. So, in the secret marriage, Tybalt sent a challenge to Romeo, but Romeo refuses to fight, which angers his friend Mercutio, who then fights with Tybalt. But Mercutio accidentally killed when Romeo tried to stop the fight. Due to his anger, he pursues Tybalt and kills him, banished by the prince. Juliet, that time, is anxious when Romeo is late to meet her, and she knows Tybalt's death. Romeo spends the night with Juliet before he leaves for Mantua. Meanwhile, the Capulets family grieves for Tybalt, so Lord Capulet moves to marry Juliet to Paris. Juliet's parents are angry when Juliet doesn't want to marry Paris, but they don't know about the secret marriage to Romeo. And after that, Friar Lawrence helps Juliet by providing her a sleeping draught that will make her seem dead. So the friar sends a messenger to warn Romeo of Juliet's plan. So after the Juliet's plan, so the crucial message to Romeo does not arrive in time because the plague is in town. So the messenger cannot leave Verona. He heard the news from his servant that Juliet is dead. He buys a poison from Mantua. He returns to Verona and kills the mourning Paris. So Romeo takes his poison and dies. So while Juliet awakens from her drug coma, she learns what has happened to Friar Lawrence, but she refuses to leave the tomb and stab herself. So death of the children lead the families to make peace, and they promise to erect a monument in Romeo and Juliet's memory. So that is the story of Romeo and Juliet.
So on this part, I will be showing to you the pop-up book made for the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So this is what I made. Now first let's take a look at the characters. So of course we've got here the main characters, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. We also have here Mr. Bingley and Jane Bennet, who plays vital roles in this novel. So the ones in between here are the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, and Mr. Wickham and Lydia Bennet. So this is how it looks. Now for the next page, we will see here the scenes from, again, the Pride and Prejudice, which is a novel by Jane Austen. So the arrival of the wealthy Mr. Bingley to the estate of Netherfield Park causes a commotion in the nearby village of Longbourn. In the Bennet household, Mrs. Bennet is desperate to marry Bingley to one of her 5 daughters. They are Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, or Lydia. When Bingley meets Jane at a ball, so this one here, this scene here, he seems immediately smitten with her. Yet Bingley's snobby friend Darcy is rude to Elizabeth. Through the next few social gatherings, Jane and Bingley grow closer, while Darcy, despite himself, finds himself becoming attracted to Elizabeth's beauty and intelligence. So these are the few social gatherings that they attended to, and that's where they got the chance to meet each other again. So when Jane is caught in the rain, showed by this picture here, she was caught in the rain while traveling to visit Bingley. She falls ill and must stay at Netherfield. Elizabeth comes to Netherfield to care for Jane, and though Bingley's sisters are rude and condescending to her, Darcy's attraction to her deepens. Elizabeth, however, continues to consider him a snob. Meanwhile, Mr. Collins, a pompous clergyman and Mr. Bennet's cousin and heir, visits the Bennets in search of a marriageable daughter. At about the same time, the Bennet sisters also need Wickham, an army officer Elizabeth finds charming and who claims Darcy wronged him in the past. Elizabeth's prejudice against Darcy hardens, and soon after, at a ball at Netherfield, Mrs. Bennet Bingley suddenly departs for London. Mrs. Bennet, much to Darcy's annoyance, comments that a wedding between Jane and Bingley is likely to soon take place. So Collins, in the meantime, proposes to Elizabeth, who declines, angering her mother, but pleasing her father. Collins then proposes to Elizabeth's friend Charlotte Lucas, who accepts out of a desire for security rather than a need for love. So those are those like stories, or those parts of the novel are depicted by these scenes right here. Moreover, Bingley suddenly departs for London on business, and Caroline informs Jane by letter that not only will they not be returning, but moreover her brother is planning to wed Georgiana, Darcy's sister. So Jane is of course crushed. Elizabeth is sure Darcy and Caroline are deliberately separating Bingley and Jane. The sisters' aunt and uncle, Mr. Gardiner, and Mrs. Gardiner invite Jane to London, hoping that she will get over her disappointment. But after she arrives, Caroline snubs her and she regrets letting herself fall in love with Bingley. Elizabeth visits Charlotte and Mr. Collins, where they encounters Collins' patron and Darcy's relative, the wealthy and formidable Lady Catherine. Darcy arrives and surprises Elizabeth by joining her for long intimate walks. She grows angry, however, when she learns that Darcy advised Bingley against marrying Jane. Oblivious, Darcy announces his love for her and proposes marriage. Elizabeth refuses his proposal and accusing him of ruining Jane's marriage and mistreating Wickham. In a letter, Darcy explains that he intervened because he felt Jane did not truly love Bingley. Wickham, he writes, is a liar and a scoundrel. Elizabeth begins to feel she has misjudged Darcy and may have been rash in turning him down. Returning home, Elizabeth finds that Lydia has become smitten with Wickham. She urges her father to intervene, but he chooses to do nothing. Elizabeth soon accompanies the Gardiners on a trip. During the trip, Elizabeth visits Pemberley, Darcy's magnificent estate. She fantasizes about being his wife there and is further impressed when he unexpectedly shows up and introduces her to his charming sister, Georgiana. Bingley also arrives and reveals that he is still in love with Jane. Elizabeth's trip is cut short by a letter from Jane announcing that Lydia has eloped with Wickham. Fearing a scandal that will ruin all the daughters' futures, the Bennets search for Lydia in London. When Mr. Gardiner tracks them down, Wickham demands his debts to be paid off in return for marrying Lydia. The Bennet assumes that Gardiner gives in to the demand, since Lydia and Wickham soon return, playing the happy newlyweds. Mrs. Bennet is happy that at least one of her daughters is married. Elizabeth soon discovers that Darcy, not Gardiner, paid off Wickham's debts out of love for her. Bingley and Darcy return to Netherfield, and Bingley finally proposes to an overjoyed Jane, while Darcy goes to London on business. Lady Catherine visits Elizabeth, warning her to not marry Darcy. However, Elizabeth refuses to promise. On his return, Darcy asks Elizabeth again to marry him, and this time she accepts, telling him her prejudice against him had made her blind. Darcy acknowledges that his pride made him act rudely. Both couples are married, and the Bennet family rejoices in their daughter's happiness. And that's basically how the novel went. So let me show you again this pop-up book cover page. And these are the elements for the characters. For the most important scenes for the entire novel, and more here. And for the last page is this one. So this basically shows, the two couples, or the two Bennet daughters who are married to Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. And that's it.
So the next is the poem by Maya Angelou. It is entitled Still I Rise. So I'm gonna read the poem to you. So you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wheels pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes? Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laughed like I've got a gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I am a black ocean leaping and wide, wheeling and swilling I bear in tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So Maya Angelou's Still I Rise is a powerful poem that draws on a range of influences, including her personal background and the African American experience in the United States. Its message of liberation and survival was a consistent theme of Angelou's work. So Still I Rise is an empowering poem about the struggle to overcome prejudice and injustice. When read by victims of wrongdoing, the poem becomes a kind of anthem, a beacon of hope for the oppressed and downtrodden. It is a reminder of the abuse of power by those who sit in government, like the judiciary, the military, and the police force. For members of the public, it sends out the clear, repeated message of hope. No matter circumstance, there must always be hope to cling to. Also, Still I Rise is primarily about self respect and confidence. In the poem, Angelou reveals how she will overcome everything through her self esteem. She shows how nothing can get her down. She will rise to any occasions, and nothing, not even her skin color, will hold her back. This poem is her declaration that she, for one, would not allow the hatefulness of society to determine her own success. For the major theme of this poem, Still I Rise is one, overcoming oppression, believe in oneself, and love for one's culture.
Next is Hope by Emily Dickinson. So hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and the things that tune without the words, and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm, that could abash the little bird, that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land, and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity. It asks a crumb of me. So the hope is a thing with feathers is one of the best known of Emily Dickinson's poems. So an extended metaphor, it likens the concept of hope to a feathered bird that is permanently perched in the soul of every human. So there it sings, no never stopping in its quest to inspire. So the belle of Amherst, so called, remained an enigma. Her poetry was highly original but was dismissed or simply misunderstood when she sent her work out of praser or publication. So it was only after she had passed away and her poems circulated more widely that critics began to appreciate her genius. So for the summary of the hope is the thing with feathers, no? Full of figurative language. So this poem is an extended metaphor, no? Transforming hope into a bird. No, the poet loved birds, so that is ever present in the human soul. So it sings especially when times get tough. No, a hope springs eternal might be a reasonable summing up. So the rhythm of the poem varies in the places too, no, which may not be apparent on the first sighting. So readily set to music, now the words are a reminder of the poet's yearning for fulfillment in both creativity and love. And they beautifully encapsulate what hope is for us all. Something that is inspire and make us fly. For analysis, stanza by stanza. So Emily Dickinson did not give titles to her poems, so the first line is always given as the title. So her poems are also given numbers. Now, in 1998, Franklin published a definitive version of her poems, now closely following the poet's form and layout. And this poem is number 314. So for the first stanza, so the first word is given a special emphasis with speech marks, no inverted commas, quotation marks. So as if the poet wants to define that elusive word hope, and she does so with metaphor. Hope has feathers and it can like a bird na perch in a human soul. So feathers are soft and gentle to the touch, but they are also strong in flight. So even on tiny birds, and feathers are made up of complex individual fibers. So unity is strength. So the imagery here grows stronger as the reader progresses. Not only is hope feathery, it can sing. So it sits on a perch and sings the whole time. But the song is special for there are no words, no diction for anyone to understand rationally. So for the second stanza, so the first line is unusual in the use of the double dash. Now there are two distinct pauses which the reader has to be careful with. Yes, as I read a while ago, now I think that it is different from, you know, other poems. So hope is always singing, as we know from the first stanza, but it sings the sweetest when the going gets rough, when the gale starts to blow. So when life is hard and things are thrown at us, the pressure relentless, there is hope, singing through the chaos mayhem. So for the third stanza, so the personal pronoun I appears for the first time, so indicating a personal connection to this subject perhaps. So Emily Dickinson thought of herself as a little bird. So think, so the link is direct. So the speaker has heard a bird during the hardest, coldest times when emotions are churning and life surreal. So but even when things are extreme, hope is still there. I never ask for anything. Hope give us much but never ask for a crumb in return. So it is all about inspirational yet slightly mysteriousness indeed. So hope wells up in the heart and soul, yet who knows where it comes from. So philosophy, religion, psychology, and even metaphor are not sufficient. So there is an abstract nature of to hope. You know, it can give us strength to carry on the most adverse of condition. Its voice can be heard despite the noise at the height of the storm. So that is all about the Hope by Emily Dickinson.